when my former husband stood in the middle of a crowded local diner and told his brand new partner that I had never amounted to anything in life. I was only 3 short months away from being promoted to a senior military commander. I was 40 years old, standing on the hot asphalt of that Texas parking lot, watching him introduce his young, wealthy bride to our 16-year-old daughter while completely tearing down every single thing I had ever worked to build. My daughter watched me with a painful mix of embarrassment and pity while my ex smirked and explained that I came from absolute trash, so nobody could really expect much from me anyway. His new wife gave me that fake, condescending smile that wealthy people reserve for distant poor relatives, whispering how sweet it was that I tried my best despite my background. I simply stared back, kept my composure, and guided my daughter toward my car without offering a single word of defense or anger. As we drove down the highway, my daughter turned to me in frustration and asked why. I never stood up for myself or put her father in his place. I gently told her that true worth never needs to be proved to people who are determined to look down on you. She did not understand my response at all, having been raised inside her father's privileged world of private country clubs, large brick estates, and endless luxury. Completely isolated from where I had actually come from, I grew up inside a tiny, dilapidated mobile home in a forgotten corner of rural Texas, raised by a hardworking mother who scrubbed floors for wealthy families while my father vanished when I was little. I wore hand-me-down clothes, depended on government school lunches, and learned very quickly that society judges you harsh when your home address includes a lot number. But I possessed a sharp mind, and I knew early on that education was my only ticket out of that cycle. I earned perfect grades through sheer determination, worked long shifts at a local grocery store on weekends, and secured a full academic scholarship to a state university, becoming the first person in my family to ever attend college. During my sophomore year, I met my ex, who came from an elite dynasty of wealthy physicians in Dallas. He found my working-class background quaint and humble, while I foolishly believed he was my key to living a stable and respectable life. We married when I was 22, and I immediately dropped out of university to work full-time supporting him through medical school and residency. By the time our daughter was born and he finished his medical training, I had spent nearly 7 years working low-paying administrative desk jobs. I was 29 years old with an unfinished degree, while my husband began looking at me with the same cold disgust his mother always had. Our divorce was swift and devastating, as his expensive lawyers easily convinced the judge that his high income and sprawling mansion offered a far better environment for our young daughter. I was granted only weekend visits and received barely enough support to cover basic living expenses, while he kept primary custody. His legal team mocked my lack of career achievements in open court, leaving me broken, broke, and stripped of the child I loved more than life itself. Rather than giving up, I walked straight into a military recruiting office at 30 years old and enlisted, determined to rewrite my entire destiny. The armed forces did not care about my past or my lack of a diploma, only whether I had the grit and discipline to lead people under extreme pressure. I threw myself into officer training, earned my commission, and specialized in complex logistics, ensuring critical supplies and weapons moved efficiently across massive operational zones. I was exceptional at my job, rising rapidly from junior lieutenant to captain, and eventually securing the rank of major within just 8 years. Yet my ex remained completely ignorant of my success, convincing himself and our daughter that I was merely a low-level clerk performing basic menial tasks for a modest paycheck. He constantly dropped subtle, arrogant remarks to our daughter, reminding her that her mother lived in a simple apartment and could never understand their high-class lifestyle. When my ex remarried a young, glamorous corporate marketing executive, the emotional distance between my daughter and me grew even wider and more painful. My daughter began rolling her eyes whenever I picked her up in my modest sedan, constantly comparing my quiet life to her father's extravagant mansion and European vacations. It broke my heart to see her absorbing his arrogant attitude, but I refused to engage in petty arguments, choosing instead to focus completely on my military career. Everything changed drastically on a cold Tuesday morning when my commanding officer called me into his office to deliver life-changing news. I had been officially selected for promotion to lieutenant colonel, a high-ranking senior officer position, commanding hundreds of personnel and millions of dollars in equipment. I sat in my office and wept silent tears of relief, realizing that the poor girl from Lot 47 had accomplished what everyone claimed was completely impossible. I immediately called my daughter to share the news about my upcoming promotion ceremony, but she sounded completely distracted and quickly hung up to go out to dinner with her stepmother. When the official ceremony took place at the base, neither my ex nor my daughter showed up, choosing instead to go luxury dress shopping for an upcoming hospital gala. Only my elderly mother was present, sitting proudly in the front row as the heavy silver rank was pinned onto my formal uniform. A few weeks later, my daughter's high school hosted an annual career day, inviting parents to speak to the graduating class about their professions. When her father canceled due to a last-minute surgical schedule and her stepmother declined, my daughter hesitantly called and asked if I could fill the empty slot. I agreed immediately, arriving at her high school dressed in my immaculate, metal-covered service uniform with silver oak leaves shining on my shoulders. The entire classroom fell dead silent when I walked through the door, my daughter staring at me in absolute shock as she took in my imposing presence and decorated chest. I delivered a powerful presentation about leading hundreds of troops, managing complex international supply lines, and carrying the immense responsibility of human lives in high-conflict areas. By the time I finished speaking, the students were asking endless questions, and her teacher praised my extraordinary leadership achievements in front of the entire class. My daughter walked out of the school beside me with her head held high, looking at me with a profound new level of respect and genuine pride. That weekend, she requested to stay at my home instead of her father's mansion, sitting on my living room couch for hours, asking detailed questions about my career. She was utterly stunned to learn that I was an elite senior officer preparing to deploy overseas as second in command of an entire operational battalion. Within days, my ex called my phone in utter disbelief, his voice trembling as he asked if it was true that I was a high-ranking commander heading overseas. I calmly reminded him that I had been an officer for over a decade, but he had been too blinded by arrogance and class prejudice to ever listen. Silence stretched across the line before he quietly asked if our family could gather for a dinner so he could properly acknowledge everything I had accomplished. We met at an upscale restaurant, where my ex stood up the moment I walked in wearing my official service uniform, looking at me as if he were seeing a complete stranger. During dinner, he publicly apologized for spending 10 years underestimating me and using my poor background to make himself feel superior. I looked him dead in the eye and told him I forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because I no longer needed his approval to know my own value. Standing in the parking lot after dinner, he watched me with deep respect, promising to completely overhaul his arrogant attitude and become a genuinely supportive co-parent moving forward. 3 weeks later, my daughter and ex hugged me tightly at the military airfield, tears streaming down my daughter's face as she watched her mother prepare to lead hundreds of soldiers overseas. Today, as I manage major operations thousands of miles away, I know that my true strength never came from proving my enemies wrong, but from defining my own worth on my own terms.